Can we incentivize news outlets to be less polarizing? This is something that is directly connected with our industry. Journalists do not have incentives in any respect to write honest stories. They don't have incentives in any respect to write in-depth investigative journalism, and they don't have incentives in any respect to write stories that don't fit into a predefined political agenda. If you work for the Daily Wire or Breitbart or Fox News, there is going to be a conservative slant in everything you're allowed to talk about, or else it just won't get published. If you find an article that's damaging for the Republican of the week that is not on the hit list, so Mitt Romney's okay, but Trump is not, for example, then you're not allowed to publish, or at least your publication will be much lower on the stack, or else you're called a pariah. And it's the exact same for MSNBC, CNN, CNBC, CBS, these guys. They live in that this versus that, tit for tat, narrative journalism culture. Okay? Narrative journalism. We have a narrative. We want to broadcast that narrative. Doesn't matter if it's true. Doesn't matter if it fits reality. This is the narrative. Adhere to it. Because at the end of the day, it's entertainment. At this point, it's kayfabe. It's world wrestling. It's like Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant and Jake the Snake and Macho Man Randy Savage and these other people. And you're watching like, who's going to win WrestleMania? Who's going to win? What's going to happen? Oh, somebody just entered the ring with a chair. Oh no, what's going to happen? Are they going to pull this one out? It's storytelling. Now, we all know it's fake, but the people involved pretend that it's real and they never break character. News media has become wrestling. Okay, you might as well hire Vince McMahon to run these things. This is why we have a reality TV show guy as our president. Was that accidental? No, he's just the best at that world that has been created by these organizations. So how do you change it? You don't change it by saying be better. You don't change it by saying be honest. You say make a different model where people can make more money being honest and doing real journalism than doing the narrative kayfabe crazy shit that they're doing today. That's one dimension of it. The other dimension is that the distribution rails are being controlled and curated and censored. And it's very deeply disturbing to me. There's a reason why Joe Rogan moved to Spotify. And by the way, no media coverage, just like 3 stories. Oh, look, he made $100 million. That was the story. Joe Rogan makes $100 million for moving to Spotify. The story should have been, guy got so fed up with YouTube censorship, soft censorship, and threats of censorship and demonetization that he had to leave an open platform to go to a different platform and took the best deal he could find. Guy's got 20 to 30 million people listen to him every week, which means he's the single most popular source of long-form news in the entire United States, if not the entire world. Okay? So love him or hate him, Rogan is an enormous voice that people pay attention to, and not for 30-second snippets, not for an hour-long segment that's tightly curated with visuals and flashiness like the O'Reilly effect or something. No, they listen to him for hours on end while driving a forklift, while being a long-haul trucker, while stocking shelves, while in the back cooking in the restaurant, okay? And the wealthy people in their beautiful homes on a treadmill, they put the earbuds in, they listen to this guy. The rich, the poor, the young, the old, the educated, the non-educated, they all listen to this guy. He's a humongous force that has given a platform to so many people that are not in the mainstream. And he's mostly ignored by the entire media and treated in such a way that he has to go to Spotify and make a deal just to be able to get out of that environment that was becoming increasingly more toxic. I mean, it's like the most popular live stream on YouTube, not trending, never trending. Why? Because they didn't like the particular guest that he has on. It's insanity. It's absolute insanity. And then the media descriptions of him, a comedian, an entertainer, a Republican. Whoa, Joe Rogan? A racist. He gave a platform to racists. It's insanity. They can't even label the guy correctly. So you have to change the distribution rails. Trump's censorship on Twitter is a great example of another problem with these rails. the audacity and arrogance of a platform to say it is our duty to censor the politicians of the world leaders. So isn't that the point of the ballot box? We, the people, get to decide whether these leaders are credible or not. They have power. This man can end the world with nuclear weapons. Yet some people at Twitter say it is a good idea for us to step in and start deciding what's true and what's not true with political forces. So now he has to do that for every single politician in every single country that uses this platform. If somebody in Accra says something, they now have to understand, is that true or not true? Or else, by their own standards, they have a double standard. If Macron from France says something offensive about the Algerians or about the protesters in France in French, they have to have a guy who makes a call on that. And every time you censor one of these politicians, they now become the enemy of the platform. It is an endless Pyrrhic war that cannot be won because it's not the job of these platforms to censor people. And they say, but we're private companies. They're really not anymore. They're utilities. We trust these things to be our source of news. We trust these things to be our livelihood and income. And just because they're under private custodianship, it's like saying, what if all the trains and buses in your country are owned by private companies and they just make a decision no Jews can ride the trains? Would anybody be okay with that? Would they make a decision that if they don't like the things that you say, you can't ride the buses in your country? They say, oh, but it's private bus. Deal with it. You say, but that's the only bus. That's the only platform. I can only get to work that way. Oh, I'm so sorry. Only deal with it. So here's how you solve the problem, by transcending it. You have to get the rails that these things live on off of private ownership and into the world of protocols, just like payment rails. That's why the killer app for cryptocurrencies with money, because we had to build a settlement and clearing system at the same time. We had to build our own banking system at the same time. So people couldn't use the settlement and clearing systems and the banking system to shut people out. If your business was inconvenient, you're an arms dealer, you sell pot, suddenly you're unbanked. You can't settle. You can't accept anything but cash. Now we have an independent system that does not care if you're selling marijuana or you're selling alcohol or you're selling children's stories. It's all treated equal in terms of its access to the marketplace, and then society decides what's good and bad, and they have other systems for that. Similarly, social media needs to move to a distribution platform that is decentralized and open. Then we build businesses and curations and other things on top of that, and then community curation is how we get to where we need to go. Micro tipping is one of the greatest examples of that and will be the killer app within 10 years in our industry. If you like what I have to say, you click a button and it costs you 0.001 pennies. But if I have 10 million people in my audience, every time I do a live stream, I'd make $100,000 or something like that. If they keep tipping every time they hear a good comment, each individual, it's nothing to them. Okay? That's why models like BATS are so interesting and other things like that. And they're things that will continue to grow in popularity. What does it mean? It means that the media member, the figurehead, the opinion leader works for his audience. So if the audience says, we want you to do investigative journalism for this stuff, we want you to comment on these particular types of issues with this type of philosophy, the audience will get what it pays for. Instead, right now, they work for the ratings, which allow them to sell to advertisers, and then the advertisers basically control. So they have a band of what they're allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say, and they have to live in that little bubble there. So the incentives are all wrong. We need a direct relationship with our audience, and that means we need open systems to do that. And then over time, we can create bounties and incentives. Like here's one example of investigative journalism that is just extraordinary to me. Absolutely extraordinary to me that no one has done it. So there is great evidence that's brewing from different sources through the periphery, not the mainstream media, that coronavirus could have been designed, or at the very least came from a lab, and we would know which lab it came from. The Wuhan lab that was a major virological research center, probably also a bioweapons center. But the CCP will never be honest about that. Now, you'd say this disease has shut down the whole world. It's caused all this death, all this chaos. It's hurt all of us. And everybody knows somebody who's either lost somebody, lost a business, or had some tragedy as a direct result of coronavirus. So the origins of this thing ought to be one of the sexiest, most important studied stories ever. And in my country, the media seems to think that it's perfectly acceptable for the time being to just take direct quotes from the Communist Party of China as canon and say that's truth, and anything that deviates from that is not. When they have every single incentive to lie about the origins of this, they will never be honest. It's like Baghdad Bob, the tank sergeant in Baghdad. They just will never be honest. They don't have to be. It's their mandate not to be. So why? Well, some cynical people think that's because, well, if it's a China virus, China killed 100,000 Americans, not Trump. So let's just let it be the Trump virus until November. Then it can be the China virus and we can do something about it. Or maybe we don't want war with China. Or maybe we have Chinese ownership of our company, so we're not allowed to say anything. It's why the maps look a certain way with the NBA. And, and it's why Disney says certain things in really curious ways. Okay, money talks. So this tells you that there's something fundamentally broken with the way that we curate information, the way that our platforms for distributing information work. And at any time, any person who has an inconvenient opinion can be censored. So fixing the media is not going to be simple. You have to change the incentives. You have to change the relationship between the content producers and the people who consume the content. And you have to make sure that the rails that ship the content are free and fair. And this is a war that's going to have profound implications. If we lose it, everything you see will be seen through a ministry of information. If not public, it will be private and curated in a way where the experience you get is an experience that someone else has decided is the experience you should get. Not the experience you've decided for yourself, not the information you've decided for yourself. Someone else has decided what's true and false. Someone else has decided what is real, what's not real, what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, what should be censored, what should not be censored, and then given that to you, and that's the only thing you're allowed to see. That is antithetical to everything I stand for and my country was founded on. And every single time in human history, we have attempted to give this power to a governing structure. They have abused it and misused it to preserve their power and silence their critics. There are no exceptions you can find in the long run, every single time. And now we live in a day where the tools can be automated and they can be deployed at a scale that we have never seen before in human history. It is one of the biggest moral imperatives of the 21st century that we solve this problem, and we do not allow this problem to persist. One of the biggest moral imperatives. And if we do not solve it, we will live in 1984. Absolutely will live. If you doubt me, you have to look no further than these protests that have recently happened in the United States. Wherever you sit on Black Lives Matter, it's a separate issue. If you are a medical professional, an epidemiologist, a health professional, and you say that it's a bad deal to have large groups of people clustered together with limited protective equipment for long periods of time, because not only will they contract whatever disease is affecting society, they will go home and spread it to their family members, in many cases the most weak and vulnerable amongst us, and then at the same time have that opinion and then say, but when they do it for the things I politically agree with, that's okay. You have left the realm of science, you have left the realm of argumentation and reason, and you've entered the realm of propaganda. It is okay to do the things that are beneficial to my views and my party and my view of reality. It is not okay to do the exact same thing, but opposite of what I view as right. That's no longer science. Science doesn't work that way. It's not like saying when gravity is convenient to me, I will accept gravity, and when gravity is inconvenient, like when I'm falling off the mountain, I will no longer accept gravity and float away. You don't get that choice. And similarly, medicine doesn't work that way. There's no virus in the history of humanity that is a woke virus that says, I philosophically agree with what these protesters are protesting about, so I'm not going to infect them, their friends, and their family. Okay, why is this relevant? It's relevant because over 1,200 medical professionals and public health people signed a letter saying that they don't want these protests to stop, citing coronavirus, that it's okay for them to continue. They said the exact opposite for other protests. So other protests are a public health risk and must be stopped with force if necessary. The protests we agree with must continue. Okay, that's propaganda. And it has no place in reasoned society. It has no place with people who assert to be representing the public good. And the problem is that if you control all the media, if you control all the information, It's like that episode where Picard gets tortured by the Cardassians, and they keep asking him, are there 4 lights or 5 lights? And he keeps saying there's 4 lights. And the Cardassian says it's wrong, it's 5, and electrocutes him. And at the end of the episode, he admits that if he really wanted him to, he could see 5 lights because he had been broken. This is where we'll go if these things are controlled for too long. Because the cost and consequences of not agreeing with there being 5 lights are that you become a pariah in society. You're outed. You can't get a job. You can't get an education. You can't get a good, meaningful relationship. You're the other, the discontent. So you have to be super, super, super careful with where this goes. And I'm seeing definitely the symptoms of 1984 seeping their way in with trigger language like hate speech and this, and we have to do what's right, and fake news and fact checking. And this is not a partisan issue. Both parties seem to be doing this. And this is not even a left-right thing. There's many different kinds of political parties all throughout the world. America, we tend to be bipolar or one or the other, but in other countries, you can have a much more plurality. It doesn't matter if there's 5 ruling parties, 10. There's an overall trend with the powerful to use the distribution, curation, creation of content in a way to basically, before it gets to you, the consumer, make sure that you get it packaged in the way that they want it to. And if you oppose it, then you're a conspiracy theorist, a bad person, a disgusting person. Super, 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 super dangerous. One of the greatest dangers of the 21st century, right up there with existential threats like AI and other things. It's super dangerous, more dangerous than nuclear weapons.